lovelies, it's me. So this is a requested video from a Patreon member, and I'm calling it What Do You Want, Witch? And it's actually about the question how we know what we want to spellcast for. And the question was around knowing what we want, and how do we do that, and how do we put that out into the universe, and all that good stuff. So I have notes, because I had many different feelings about this topic, and I think it went deeper than I originally thought it would do. Mistress Virgo is now in session. So the first thing I want to talk about is the want/need divide. And I've written here that there is actually wisdom in the idea that, and this is if we're speaking, saying, I am not sure what I want or need in the fullness of my life, because what you want or need is liable to change, and nobody knows this better than me, especially right now, that what we thought was going to be what we wanted, or what we needed going forward, can change at the drop of a hat, and suddenly it's not going to be what we want or need anymore, for all sorts of reasons, depending on what it is, of course, that we're talking about that we wanted. So there is an element of wisdom in knowing that we're not all knowing, that we're guessing at what we will need and what will serve us going forward, and we kind of basically go into the covenant of spellcrafting with the universe with a sense of hope. We're hoping for the best, we're hoping for a better tomorrow, and we're casting for that. We're putting our will out into the universe and saying, I might not fully understand the path ahead, but I would like the resources to best cope with it, best live my best life, and feel happiness and have good moments and the tools to see me through the lessons. And I think that is the nutshell answer, but we're going to get into it a little bit deeper. So the first thing I want to talk about, as I said, is the want-need divide. It can be really difficult to discern what it is that we want versus what it is that we need. And we're our own worst enemies when it comes to this, because what we need, we might not necessarily want. And if we get what we need and we hate it, we can feel hard done by the universe, by the world in general. Maybe it will be for the best someday, I hope. But right in the moment of feeling it, living it, which I am, it doesn't feel great. So the want and need divide is a very interesting thing. We often want things based on short bursts of emotion. We do definitely have emotional reactions to the world around us, and magic is emotion anyway. It's emotional based. It is our asserting our will from a place of raw emotion that is the fuel into the universe, and the universe goes about making that manifest through the path of least resistance. And sometimes the universe has a better idea of maybe the coding of where we're going, or the current of where we're going, and that energetic wave that we are putting out before we fully understand where we're at. Sometimes our intuition knows better than our reason, our head, and I feel like that's because our intuitive self is tapped in to the cycles, and the head can often resist. So the intuition kind of has an inkling, kind of has a feeling, kind of has a knowing about where we're going. We're rhyming, apparently. I'm a poet and I know it. And our head can often resist. Our head's like, I don't want that. I don't want to go that way. I don't want to face that fear. I don't want to do the thing that I don't want to do. I don't want to overcome that hurdle because I'm not ready. All of that, negative headspace stuff can really get in the way of where the intuition already knows we're going, whether we like it or not. And fear is a big mindset. And I've said recently that fear is the compass point, the arrowhead the place that we're going, and there's no point agonizing over fear because it just slows you down, it stagnates you, it stops you. Instead, we have to alchemize it into fuel, and many of our emotions have to be alchemized into fuel. So that is the want-need divide, and it is worth bearing that in mind. I know that doesn't massively help when it comes to knowing what to spellcast for, but I think it might help with alleviating the worry of perhaps not knowing exactly what it is that you want to spellcast for. The second thing I have written down is the shadow of asking. The guilt, the shame, and the feeling of being undeserving. I think sometimes we do know what we want, what we really, really want. Zigga zigga, dating myself. But we're afraid to ask for it, or we think we'll be ashamed of asking for it, or guilty, or we shouldn't for some reason. There is also, unfortunately, a whole diatribe of diarrhea that follows the spiritual community around, where people try to shame other people who are involved in the manifestation of a life from a physical perspective. That can be making money, that can be running a business, having a job, buying a house, talking about money spells, wealth spells, all that sort of thing. There are people who follow these people. There are people who follow those energies around, trying to shame them, make out that they're not spiritual, trying to separate the physical realm from the spiritual realm, which in paganism doesn't make sense to me personally. And we've had conversations on the Patreon podcast of the last podcast I did as of when this goes up, and you can find the notes beneath it if you haven't already read it, because I will probably make this one public as well, because I think it's a good topic, and it will go up in Patreon first and then on YouTube. But that podcast has in the little starry bullet points that, you know, money as a cycle, and the balance and the flow in of wealth and things, and some revelationary moments about money and money as energy. But there are people who will follow spiritual communities around and try to shame people. You shouldn't want money, you shouldn't want things, etc., etc., or you shouldn't run a business, that's not spiritual, yada yada yada, as if they get to determine what's in somebody's heart and soul. And obviously they might follow more, it tends to be more Eastern philosophy of the material should be completely and utterly released, although I think people take that to an extreme that isn't necessarily meant in the teachings. It's more that the material shouldn't have ownership of you, and you should be able to let it all go. It's not that you should, you know, because that's how cults form, isn't it, basically? When you get right down that line of argument, that's how cults form, with one person being like, you don't need the financial benefits of this world, you don't need the material, and you should give it all to me, and I will free you of it. And that person is obviously a manipulator and is taking all that money and is controlling people, because we can't operate in the world without finances very easily, if at all. 99% of us can't do it. And as I said, we talked more about money in that podcast, and I think, you know, that's a really good one. And I really want to talk about the body as the vessel, and we're going to be doing that in one of the Bridget videos, so I'm not going to go into that too much here, but I will say that the guilt trip about the physical manifestation needs to stop, because I feel like it is directly it's almost like middle finger in the face of the earth. Like, we as pagans celebrate the earth as a living being and her bounty, and we live off it, right? And money is the human kind of alchemization of earth bounty, because it starts off with trade, right? It starts off with growing crops, and I trade the crops for milk that the farmer has got from his cows, so we trade, right? And then from that, money rises. Now, there's problems with greed and things, of course there is. There's problems with exploitation, of course there is. But for the most people who are asking questions like this, they're not people who are like, I want to be a billionaire tomorrow at any expense. They're not those kinds of people. They would like decent lives for the most part. And maybe some people do want to be super rich so they can never have to worry about it, but it's usually from a place of, I never have to worry about it ever again. That's where it would come for me. Like, sure, I'd like a lot of money, because then I don't ever have to stress about this or this ever again. And I think you have to be very careful where the shadows of being guilted and shamed and feeling undeserving come from when looking at spellcasting for what it is that you want/need. I've also written down next that the question is actually harder than you think. Because the question is not, what am I spellcasting for? What do I want? It is on the surface of it, but what it actually is the question is actually, who am I? And who do I want to become? What is of value to me? What is important? What is really important? What is more of a need than a want? And that's hard. That can take soul searching. That can take all sorts of journey work, journaling, dream analysis, sitting and contemplating who you are as a person, as an individual, the places that you feel you want to grow, what would help you grow, things of that nature. And the way that I think is the easiest way to start is to think of ourselves as a pot plant. I have a point, I promise. So the first things are basic needs, right? We need to be fed, we need to be watered, we need to be planted, we need roots, we need to be talked to from time to time, things of that nature. We need touch and sex, and most of us, and comfort and things of those nature. So a lot of spell work falls into the basic camps of monetary gain to get the food and the water and the house, to pay the bills, things of that nature. Perhaps expanding our job, expanding realm of influence, our changing job to be more in alignment with something we enjoy, and things of that nature. So a lot of spells are sort of categorized into, money, love spells, healing spells, maybe divination, because that can be a spell too, of course. Maybe doing a divinational spell to what would serve my highest good could be a really great idea, or a tarot reading for that matter around that. And going from there and using that as a jumping off point. So getting really, really simplistic can be helpful when you know that the question is actually much more complicated. Which kind of feeds into the next shadow, because when you look at yourself like a pot plant, you kind of tend to overcome the shadow of you are corrupt and money is the enemy. So if you want money, then you're corrupt, because money's bad. Money's evil. Money's the root of all evil. Money's just energy, guys. It's just exchange. It's exactly the same as trade. Like, people who go down this weird argument with spiritual people are like, oh, well, everything should be trade. And it's like, money is trade. You're trading money for time, money for energy, money for things. It's a trade. So the whole idea that you should go back to some kind of medieval trading system, although money's existed for far longer than that, so is weird to me. And it's basically pushing away the value judgment system that people are determined to shove down people's throats when it comes to having needs. And it's basically people who don't want other people to rise. They don't want other people to have things. It comes from a place of jealousy or envy, or kind of like an arrogance, like holding people down. So try not to ingest that, and try not to feed the shadow of that. And if you do have the shadow of being undeserving, then that requires some shadow work. And I'm working through where that comes from. Again, journaling probably. Having a good conversation with yourself. Those sorts of things. Money is energy in the end, and the only thing that you are asking for is more energy, or a return on the energy that you've put out. So for me, now looking at it, spell work is often about what I think will help me grow, and what will help my ultimate goals in life. Now, you might not know your ultimate goals in life. You might not know who you want to become, and that's valid. And that's okay. So you might want to work in the abstract in that case. Spellcasting to figure out who you are and who you want to become. Maybe to dream it. So as you dream it into being, and then you manifest it from a place of your subconscious, because your subconscious is probably going to know better, again, your intuition, than your waking mind. Your waking mind, again, might be getting in the way. Which is the problem with a waking mind, isn't it, really? It likes to overthink things and worry about things and stress about things and do as it's learnt to do and been conditioned to do. So it might be a little bit of unconditioning the mind when it comes to figuring out what it is that you want. So sometimes, of course, is figuring out what you don't want. If you really can't figure out who you want to become and what to ask for, work for, build for, then figure out who you don't want to become. All the things that you've left behind in the past that you never want to be again, and go over them, right? Like, don't beat yourself up about it, but like, I'm glad I'm not there anymore, and here's why. I don't want to be this, I don't want to be that. So who do I want to become? Who do I want to grow into? And then maybe journal that down. Maybe write all the, like, a pros and cons list, because Virgo's lists, right? But like, don't want to be, so who do I want to be? And try and get excited about it. Try and find the enthusiasm that we all had at some point. Maybe when we were going to school and we were picking subjects, maybe when we found paganism for the first time. But wherever that enthusiasm comes from growing and learning and knowing and figuring it out. Because sometimes the spell work is just about helping you to figure it out, helping you along the journey. So try and see spell work as tools to best equip you for the journey of life. Because that's what it is. And it doesn't have to be any more or any less than that. And nobody gets to judge you. Not even you. And so, ask. You might not always get what you want, but sometimes you might get what you need. Many blessings. I hope this was helpful. If not, leave me questions down below and I will attempt to answer them. Talk to you guys on the next one. Thank you again for the patrons who support the ability to continue making content, and I will see you very soon. Many blessings.